In this video, we're going to start the KutaSoftware Infinite PreAlgebra free worksheet, Least Common Multiple. In this worksheet, we're going to be finding the LCM of each, and the LCM is the least common multiple. But what exactly is the least common multiple? Well, if you remember from our greatest common factor worksheet, we found the greatest common factor of the two numbers given. So the greatest number that divided both of those numbers given. But in this case, for least common multiple, we're going to see, based on our numbers given, what the smallest number is that both of them are factors of. So we're going to see what the smallest number is that both our numbers divide into. So let's take a look at number 1. In number 1, we have 10 and 3. Now, if I'm looking for the least common multiple of both of them, I'm going to want to start with the bigger number and see if that smaller number goes into that bigger number at all. If that's the case, then this number would be the least common multiple. But in this case, it isn't. But I'm still going to start with my bigger number because it'll be easier to see if my smaller number divides something that my bigger number divides also. So for example, 3 I know does not divide 10. The next multiple of 10 would be 10 times 2, which would be 20. 3 does not divide 20. And then the next multiple of 10 would be 10 times 3, which is 30. So I know for a fact that 10 times 3 is 30, so 30 is going to be that least common multiple of both 3 and 10. Now, if I started with a smaller number, I would have had to list out those multiples. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, and so on, all the way up until I got to 30. However, for 10, all I had to do was list out 10, 20, and 30, and then I could see that 3 was divisible by 30. So that's why I like to start with the larger number. But even if you start with the smaller number, we'll get the same answer. So let's go on to number 2. In number 2, we're looking at 14 and 6 as our numbers. So 14, if I start with that number, 14 times 1 is 14. 14 times 2 would be 28. Then 14 times 3 would be 42. And I can stop here at 42 because, remembering my divisibility trick, which if you don't remember figuring out divisibility, I'll leave a link to that. So because 4 plus 2 sums to give us 6, 6 is divisible by 3. So we know that 42 is divisible by 3, and 42 is even, so we know it's divisible by 2. And when a number is divisible by both 2 and 3, it's divisible by 6. And I know that what times 6 is 42? That's going to be 7 times 6 gives me 42. So 42 is the least common multiple. Now, on to number 3, I'm dealing with 15 and 6. I know that 6 doesn't go into 15, so I'll start by figuring out the next multiple of 15. 15 times 1 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. Does 6 go into 30? Yes, it does, because 6 times 5 equals 30, therefore 30 is divisible by 6. We could also note that if we sum the digits of 30, 3 plus 0 equals 3. 3 is divisible by 3, so 30 is divisible by 3, and 30 is an even number, so that's also divisible by 2. Being divisible by both 2 and 3 means we're divisible by 6. We have 15 and 20. I know for a fact 15 does not go into 20. 20 is our bigger number, so let's look at those multiples. 20 times 1 is 20. 20 times 2 would be 40. Does 15 go into 40? Nope. So 20 times 3 would be 60. Does 15 go into 60? Yes, it does, because 15 times 4 equals 60. So 60 is our least common multiple. In number 5, we have 27 and 18. I know 18 does not go into 27, so let's see the next multiple of 27. 27 times 2 would be 54. Does 18 go into 54? Yes, it does. 18 times 3 gives us 54. Therefore, 54 is the least common multiple. 27 times 2 is 54, and 18 times 3 is 54. Now, there will be another multiple that 27 and 18 both divide, but this is the smallest one. Let's look at number 6. In number 6, we're dealing with 4 and 30. I know that 4 doesn't go into 30, so let's start listing the multiples of 30 and see if 4 goes into any of those. So 30 times 1 was 30. 30 times 2 is going to give us 60. Does 4 go into 60? Yes, it does. 4 times 15 is 60. So because 30 times 2 equals 60, and 60 is also equal to 4 times 15, 4 divides 60, and so does 30. Therefore, 60 is our least common multiple. In number 9, we have 24 and 32. I know that 24 does not go into 32, so 32 is not the least common multiple, but we'll work with this larger number to see when 24 divides into those multiples. So 32 times 2 is 64. Does 24 go into 64? No, it doesn't. So let's try 32 times 3. 32 times 3 is going to be a 96. Does 24 go into 96? Yes, 24 does go into 96. 24 times 4 equals 96, because 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1, 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 96. So 96 is indeed our least common multiple in number 7. In number 8, we have 20 and 30. 20 doesn't go into 30, but let's see the multiples of 30. We have 30, then 30 times 2 would be 60, and we can stop right there because 20 times 3 gives us 60. So 60 is our least common multiple in number 8. Now in number 9, we have 24 and 36 this time. Kind of similar to number 7, where we had 24 and 32, but this time we have 24 and 36. So 24 doesn't go into 36, but let's see the multiples of 36. 36 times 1 is 36. 36 times 2 would be 72. And 24 times 3 gives us 72. So 72 is our least common multiple in number 9. And again, 24 times 3, 4 times 3 is 12, carry the 1, 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1, which is 7. 24 times 3 is 72, so 72 divided by 3 equals 24, or 72 divided by 24 is a whole number, and 72 divided by 36 is also a whole number. Therefore, in number 9, 72s are LCM. Now in number 10, we're looking at 25 and 35. 25 doesn't go into 35 evenly, so let's write out the multiples of 35. 35 times 2 would be 70, and 25 does not go into 70. Close though, it goes into 75, but not 70. So let's now do 35 times 3. 35 times 3 is 105. 25 doesn't go into 105. Close though, it goes into 100. Now let's try 4. 35 times 4 is going to equal 140. 25 doesn't go into 140. 25 goes into 150. So we're kind of close still. Let's keep going. 35 times 5 equals 175. And 175 is our winner. That's the LCM because 25 also goes into 175, and that would be 7 times. So 175 is the LCM in number 10. Now we could have started with 25 and listed out its multiples. We could have done 25 times 1, which is 25, 25 times 2, which is 50, and then times 3 would be 75, times 4 would be 100, times 5 would be 125, times 6 would be 150, times 7 would be 175, and then eventually we'd get there. But this way, I only had to write out up to times 5, where if I started with my smaller one, I would have had to go all the way up to times 7. That's why starting with the larger number just helps us find that LCM a little bit quicker, but either way, we would get the same result. Now let's move on to number 11. In number 11, we have 18xy squared and 15y cubed. So this is mixing it up a little bit because now we're dealing with variables. But remember, the LCM is the least common multiple of each. So let's start with our numbers and then I'll talk about the variables. So finding the least common multiple that both 18 and 15 divide, let's start by listing out the multiples of 18. 18 times 1 is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. 15 doesn't go into 36, so that's not it. 18 times 3 is 54. 15 does not go into 54, so 54 isn't it. Let's try 18 times 4. 18 times 4 would be 72, and 15 does not go into that. So let's try 18 times 5, and 18 times 5 is 90, and 15 does go into 90. 90 divided by 15 is 6. So 90 right now is the least common multiple of 18 and 15. However, we don't just have those numbers, we have 18xy squared and 15y cubed. So let's look at the xy squared and the y cubed now. Between xy squared and y cubed, we have to find the least common multiple. Remember, the least common multiple is something that both of these are factors of, so the least common multiple is divisible by both of those evenly. So we know we have to have an x in it, and we know we have to have a y in it. So because there's only one x, we'll have one x, and then between y squared and y cubed, in order for this expression to be divisible by both, we're going to have a y cubed. Because look, xy cubed divided by xy squared is going to divide nicely. Xy cubed over xy squared, that will just be y. Y times xy squared will give us xy cubed. And again, if we're dealing with xy cubed, what times y cubed gives us xy cubed? That's simply an x. So because we need to multiply xy squared times y to get xy cubed, and because we need to multiply y cubed by x to get xy cubed, that's the least common multiple. So 90xy cubed is my solution in number 11. So a hint when dealing with least common multiples of variables, we're going to take the largest variable exponent of each. So between xy squared and y cubed, x, the greatest exponent was to the first, so we're going to take 1x, and then the greatest exponent with y was 3, so we were going to take y cubed. So xy cubed became the LCM of the variables, so 90xy cubed is our overall LCM. Let's go on to number 12, applying this practice. In number 12, we have 20x cubed and 16x to the fourth. Now remember that trick I told you about dealing with variables, we're going to take the greatest exponents. So between x cubed and x to the fourth, dealing with only one variable, we're going to have x to the fourth. And this is because x cubed times x gives us x to the fourth, and x to the fourth times, well, just 1 gives us x to the fourth. So x to the fourth is that LCM. But now we have to look at also our coefficients. 20 and 16, what's that coefficient LCM? So we'll start with 20 because that's our larger number. 20 times 1 is 20. 16 does not go into 20. So let's do 20 times 2, which is 40. Does 16 go into 40? Nope. So let's try 20 times 3, which is then 60. Does 16 go into 60? No, not quite. So let's try 20 times 4, which is 80. Does 16 go into 80? Yes. 16 times 5 gives us 80. So 80x to the fourth is our LCM in number 12. Let's move on to the next page. And if you're confused at any point, pause the video and rewatch some of it if necessary. Or you can go to my tutorial section where I talk about the LCM more in depth. But for now, let's move on to that next page. On this next page, we have 18 and 6v. Well, right away, looking at my coefficients, I know that 6 goes evenly into 18. 6 times 3 equals 18, so 18 is the LCM of my coefficients. 18 times 1 gives me 18, and 6 times 3 gives me 18, so 18 is divisible by both 18 and 6. So 18 is the start of my LCM, but now I have to look at my variables. And remember, I'm going to take the variable with its greatest exponent. So because there's no v over here, and there's one v over here, I will take v. So 18v is my LCM in number 13, my least common multiple. 18 times v gives me 18v, and 6v times 3 gives me 18v. Let's move on to number 14. In number 14, I have 3x squared and 10. So starting with my coefficients, I'm going to be looking at 3 and 10. 3 can't go into 10, so 10 is not the LCM. 10 times 2, let's look at that now, gives us 20. 3 does not go into 20, but 10 times 3 gives us 30, and 3 does divide into 30. 3 times 10 is 30. So if you go all the way back up to number 1, 30 was our solution for number 1 between 3 and 10. But now we have a 3x squared and a 10. But now we have a 3x squared and a 10. So looking at our exponents, we're going to take x squared. So 30x squared is our least common multiple. So 3x squared times 10 gives us 30x squared, and 10 times 3x squared gives us 30x squared. Because 10 and 3x squared didn't have anything else in common, this was the least common multiple. Moving on to number 15. In number 15, we have 20y and 14y squared. So 14 does not go into 20, but I'm going to look at 20 times 2 next. 20 times 2 would be 40. 14 does not go into 40, so now I'm going to look at 20 times 3, which is 60. 14 does not go into 60. So now I'm going to look at 20 times 4, which is 80. 14 does not go into 80. 20 times 5 is 100. 14 does not go into 100. 20 times 6 is 120. 120 is not divisible by 14. So now I'm going to try 20 times 7, which is 140. And yes, 14 does divide into 140, and that's 10 times. So 140 is our LCM among our coefficients, but now we're going to deal with our variables. We have y and y squared, so that least common multiple between y and y squared, y goes into y squared, so y squared it is. Y squared is part of that LCM, so 140 y squared is our least common multiple in number 15. In number 16, I have 25x squared and 25y. Well, 25 divides 25, so 25 is the coefficient LCM, but now I have to look at my variables. 25x squared and 25y, the least common multiple between x squared and y is x squared y. So 25x squared y is my least common multiple. And again, I have to take the greatest exponents with my variables. So the greatest exponent with an x was x squared, and the greatest exponent with a y was 1. So x squared y, 25x squared y is my least common multiple. Now on to number 17, 32u squared and 14v squared. Let's mix things up and look at our variables first. The greatest exponent with a u is squared, and the greatest exponent with a v is also squared. So u squared, v squared is going to be part of my least common multiple. Now we just have to figure out 32 and 14. Does 14 divide into 32? Nope. So now I'm going to look at 32 times 2. 32 times 2 is a 64. Does 14 divide into 64? No. So I'll look at 32 times 3. 32 times 3 is 96. 96, 14 does not go into that. So now I'm going to try 32 times 4. 32 times 4 is 128. 14 does not go into that. So now let's try times 5. 32 times 5 is 160. 14 does not go into 160. So let's try 32 times 6, which is 192. 14 does not go into 192 evenly. So let's try 32 times 7. 32 times 7 is 224. Does 14 go into 224? Yes, because 224 divided by 16 gives us that 14. So 14 times 16 is 224. So between our coefficients, the LCM was 224. 224 u squared v squared is our solution in number 17. In number 18, we have 18m squared and 24nm. 18 doesn't go into 24, so I'll look at 24 times 2, which is 48. 18 does not go into 48, so I'll look at 24 times 3. 24 times 3 is going to be 72, and 18 does indeed go into 72. 18 times 4 equals 72, 24 times 3 equals 72, and 18 times 4 equals 72. So 72 is part of my LCM. Now looking at my variables, the greatest exponent with an m is 2, and the greatest exponent with an n is 1. So I'm going to have 72 m squared n as my LCM in number 18. Now moving on to number 19, I have 16x squared y and 32x. Well, coefficients are super easy this time because 16 times 2 gives me 32, and 32 times 1 is 32, so 32 is going to be part of my LCM. Now I just have to figure out my variables, x squared y and x. The greatest exponent with an x is 2, and the greatest exponent with a y is 1. So this is going to be 32x squared y for my least common multiple in number 19. Both 16x squared y and 32x are factors of 32x squared y. In number 20, I have 30ab cubed and 20ab cubed. Among my coefficients, I've already dealt with 30 and 20 on the first page of this worksheet. But let's double check. 20 does not go into 30, but 20 goes into 30 times 2, which is 60. 20 times 3 is 60, and 30 times 2 is 60. So 60 is my LCM among my coefficients. So 60 is part of my LCM. So 60 is part of my LCM, and then I'm going to look at AB cubed and AB cubed. AB cubed and AB cubed are the same, so they divide each other, so they are multiples of each other. So 60AB cubed is my solution in number 20. They're mixing things up a bit because now we're dealing with 3 separate numbers. But again, the rules for LCM still apply. We're going to find the least number that all 3 of those divide. So let's start again with our larger number. 25 does not go into 30, but 10 does go into 30. So between 30 and 10, 30 would be our LCM, but because 25 does not divide it, it's not the LCM of all 3. So now let's look at 30 times 2, which is 60. 10 goes into 60, but 25 does not. So we're going to have to look at the next number. 30 times 3 is 90. Does 25 go into 90? No, but 10 does. But because all 3 are not multiples, we have to continue on. Now let's do 30 times 4, which is 120. 25 does not go into it, but 10 does. Still, all 3 do not apply, so let's move on. 30 times 5 is 150. Does 25 go into 150? Yes. 25 times 6 is 150, and 10 times 15 is 150, and we knew that 30 times 5 gave us 150, so because all three are multiples of 150, 150 is our least common multiple. Now we're going to look at 28, 14, and 21. Let's look back at 21 real quick. If you notice, every multiple of 30 was also a multiple of 10. And that's because every time we multiplied 30 by something, 10 times 3 is 30. So that's like multiplying 10 times 3 by the same thing we would multiply 30 by. So because 10 was a factor of 30, everything that 30 was a multiple of, 10 also was. And that might help us out a little bit in number 22. Because think about this. 14 times 2 gives us 28. 28 is 14 times 2. So everything that's a multiple of 28 is also a multiple of 14. So really we only need to focus on 28 and 21. Because looking at 28, everything that 28 is a factor of, 14 will also be a factor of. Because let's look at 28 times 2. 28 times 2 is going to be 56. And 56 is 14 times 2 times 2. So 14 divides 56, 28 divides 56, but 21 does not. So now let's look at 28 times 3. 28 times 3 is 84. That's the same as 14 times 2 times 3. That's 84. And does 21 go into 84? Yes. 21 times 4 is 84. So 84 is our least common multiple in number 22. If this needs re-explained, I'll explain it one more time. Because 10 is a factor of 30, everything that 30 is a factor of, 10 also is. So the multiples of 30 are also multiples of 10, because 30 can be written as 3 times 10 or 10 times 3. So when we multiply 30 by 2, we're multiplying 10 by 6, 3 times 2. When we multiply 30 by 3, we're multiplying 10 by 3 times 3, which is 9, and so on. Now in number 23, we have 10, 4, and 18. So let's start with that larger number. 4 does not go into 18 and 10 does not go into 18. So let's look at 18 times 2. 18 times 2 is 36. 4 goes into 36, but 10 does not. So I guess another way to look at this is in order to find something that 10 is a multiple of, it needs to end in 0. So let's ignore 4 for the moment and try to find the least common multiple between 10 and 18 and see if 4 also divides into that. 18 times 2 we said was 36. 18 times 3 is 54, which is not divisible by 10. When we multiply 18 times 4, we get a 72, which does not end in 0. 18 times 5 is 90. Ooh, 90 ends in 0, so 10 goes into 90, but does 4 go into 90? No, 4 does not go evenly into 90 because 90 divided by 4 would give us some decimal or some fraction. So we got to keep moving on. We were at 18 times 5, so now we're going to go to 18 times 6, which is 108. 108 does not end in a 0, so we know 10 does not divide that. So let's try 18 times 7, which is 126, so 10 does not divide that. 18 times 9 is 162, 10 does not divide that. And 18 times 10 is 180. Oh, here's another candidate because 180 ends in a 0, so it's divisible by 10. And does 4 go into 180? Yes, both 10, 4, and 18 are all factors of 180. So 180 is our LCM in number 23. Let's move on to number 24. In number 24, we're back to some variables. So, lucky enough for us, the variables are all the same. BA, BA, and BA. So, the least common multiple of those will be BA. A. Now we just have to find, what about our coefficients? 10, 20, and 28. Well, 10 is a factor of 20, so everything that 20 divides into, 10 will also divide into. So all the multiples of 20 are also multiples of 10. So we really just have to look at 20 and 28. So 20 doesn't go into 28, so let's try 28 times 2. 28 times 2 is 56. 56 is not a multiple of 20, so let's try 28 times 3. 28 times 3 is 84. 20 is not a multiple, so 84 is not a multiple of 20 because 84 is not divisible by 20. So let's try 28 times 4, which is 112. That doesn't work. Let's try 28 times 5. That's 140. 140 is 20 times 7, and 140, well, because 20 divides into 140 and 10 is a factor of 20, we know that 10 also divides into 140. That's 10 times 14. So 140 BA is our least common multiple in number 24. In number 25, we have 8y squared, 16xy, 16y. Well, the easiest thing here is our coefficients, because 8 divides into 16, and 16 divided by 16 is 1. So 16 is our LCM among our coefficients, but now we have to deal with our variables. We have a y squared, xy, and a y, so we're going to look for, using our trick, the greatest exponent of each. Among y, that's going to be y squared, and among x, that's going to be x to the first. So 16y squared x is our LCM in number 25. On to our last problem, number 26. Now before we dive into this problem, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Also, don't forget to subscribe so that you're updated when I come out with new videos. And share this video with somebody that you think will also find it helpful, such as your classmates. If you got something from it, chances are they will as well. But for now, let's just finish it out. In number 26, we have 28, 20, and 16. So we're going to have to try to find the least common multiple of all three of these numbers, which is going to be the trickiest one yet. 28, 20, and 16. What number does all three of those coefficients divide? Now 20 is that larger number, so let's start with that. And let's try this. I know this is going to be a large number, so let's look at the different factors. The factors of 28 are 1, 2, 4, 7, 14, and 28. The factors of 20 are 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. And the factors of 16 are 1, 2, 4, 4, but I'm going to only write 4 once because 4 times 4 is 16, 8, and 16. Now another trick for finding the LCM is to list out the factors and find a common factor among all of them. So 4 is our common factor of all of these numbers. So if we take that common factor of 4, now we just have to make sure that we create 28, 20, and 16 out of this. So 4 times 7 will give me 28. 4 times 5 will give me 20, and 4 times 4 will give me 16. So here I have 16. So 4 times 4, that's my 16. 4 times 5, that's my 20. And 4 times 7 is my 28. So whatever number this multiplies to give me is also going to be divisible by 16, 20, and 28 because I've created those numbers among this. So let's go ahead and multiply this out. 4 times 7 is 28. So I have 28 times 5 times 4, which is going to be 28 times 20. And 28 times 20 is 560. So 560 is our LCM among those numbers, and that's because I took the greatest common factor among my numbers and multiplied those factors by the other factors that gave me my numbers. So 4 times 7 was 28, 4 times 5 was 20, and 4 times 4 gave me 16. So 4 times 7, 4 times 5, and 4 times 4, I'll create that least common multiple because I used the greatest common factor in order to do so. So 560 among my coefficients. Now I just have to look at my variables. B squared, AB cubed, and B to the fourth. The greatest exponent with B is a 4, and the greatest exponent with A is 1. So this is going to be 560 B to the fourth times B to the fourth times A. And that's my final solution on this worksheet. And if you want to try out this method that I taught you in this last problem, go back and do it for another one. And this method works because 16, 20, and 28, neither of those were factors of each other. So because neither of those were factors of each other, this method works. If we would have tried it in number 24, we wouldn't have been able to do it because 10 was a factor of 20. So we really only ever needed to look at 20 and 28. But it would have worked in number 23. So let's take a look at 23 real quick. In number 23, we had 10, 4, and 18. So if I was to list out those factors, 10 would be 1, 10, and then 2 and 5. 4 would be 1 and 4, and then 2 and 2, and then 18 would be 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and then 3 and 6. The greatest common factor of all of these would be a 2. So now I'm just going to take that 2 and multiply by the other factors that give me those numbers. So 2 times 5 gave me 10, 2 times 2 gave me 4, and this 2 times 9 gave me 18. So among here, I have 10, that's 2 times 5, I have 4, that's 2 times 2, and I have 18, which is 2 times 9. So you can see when I multiply these all together, 2 times 5 is 10 times 2 is 20 times 9 is 180. So indeed, I get my LCM. And again, this only works when all three numbers are not already multiples of each other. So feel free to use that trick when you have larger numbers. Now, if you want more ways to support me, become a patron. Click my Patreon link in my video description below and make a pledge. Also, by making a pledge, you're able to have access to Patreon-only content and vote on videos, or ask me questions on that page, and I take that page as a priority, so I try to do anything there first. But the greatest support is always to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks again, and happy learning!